right. You can all see my screen, correct? Good. Great. Good afternoon and welcome to the Oregon Apprenticeship Subject Matter Expert Training. My name is Dr. Susan Bowe and my colleague, Dr. Sharon Mondragon, and I will be presenting an overview of the role and the responsibilities of the Subject Matter Expert, or SME. On behalf of the JATC, we want to thank you for your willingness to serve your school district or ESD in this mentorship role for the teacher apprentice who has been assigned to you. We will be providing time at the end of this presentation for questions from those who are in this meeting. So we encourage you to write down your questions you may have and save them to the end of the presentation. Furthermore, the JATC would appreciate all SMEs' ongoing feedback into the processes of this program for our continuous improvement. The visual of the 5 phases that you see here of the Oregon Teaching Apprenticeship provides a high-level overview of the Oregon model. The model consists of 10 steps within the first 4 phases. Phase 5, preliminary teaching phase, would include first-year teacher mentoring organized by the employer. So if you note the gray bands beneath the phases, if your training agent has chosen to use a navigator to help in supporting your apprentice, you would collaborate with a navigator from the very start to determine how you both will support the apprentice. Unlike a traditional cooperating teacher who works with a student teacher for a specific amount of time, you as the SME and the apprentice work together in the school setting from the very day of their first time in the school. During the formal clinical practice hours, beginning at step 6, the related training provider or university supervisor will begin to fulfill their responsibilities alongside you. And you will collaborate with the university supervisor on fulfilling the required formal observations and 3-way evaluation meetings as required by the EPP. We cannot stress enough how vital this collaboration with the navigator and the university supervisor is to the overall success of the apprentice, as well as providing you with additional support in mentoring your apprentice. To successfully progress through the program, the apprentice will be evaluated and re-rated by you and your mentoring team to determine their completion of their on-the-job training hours, related training instruction or coursework, as well as the work process competencies. You'll hear more about these steps in your required responsibilities later in this training. Please note that you may have an apprentice that has entered at a step other than step 1. Their entry level is based on their initial rating that was completed by the training agent, related training provider or EPP, and the navigator if one was assigned. So this table describes the 4 main program components where you, the SME, is directly responsible for. These 4 elements may be familiar to you if you have read the Policies and Procedures Handbook for this JATC. The 4 main program requirements are 1, on-the-job training hours with competencies. We call these competencies work process competencies because they are measured during the apprentice on-the-job training hours in the building and are not related to their coursework completion. Number 2, in Oregon, the SME may only be responsible for mentoring 1 apprentice at a time. This ensures full focus in mentoring with ongoing feedback and weekly check-ins with the apprentice. Number 3, your collaboration with the related training supervisor during formal clinical hours will further support the apprentice. And number 4, your responsibility in the assessment and evaluation reporting requirements. You'll notice in component 1 and component 4 that we highlight the tools that are necessary to complete the assessment and evaluation reporting requirements. So each of these responsibilities highlighted in blue are directly related to the quarterly progress record, or QPR, that your apprentice is required to submit to the JATC administrator, myself, according to the JATC schedule that I'll share with you at the end of this presentation. Your signature on this quarterly progress report is your confirmation that all targets listed have been met. Each of these documents highlighted in blue are located on the TSPC website, and we have listed all the links in a later slide in this presentation. Now I would like to introduce you to Dr. Mondragon, who will describe how to fulfill your assessment and evaluation reporting requirements and how to complete the quarterly progress report. Now, Sharon and I both recognize that keeping track of hours on a quarterly basis might seem overwhelming. So she will start by describing a tool we designed to assist the apprentice in tracking their hours monthly. It's called the Monthly On-the-Job Training Worksheet. Dr. Mondragon.
Thank you, Dr. Bowe. Good morning or good afternoon, I guess, everybody. As Susan mentioned, the quarterly progress record needs to be completed according to a schedule, and we will share that schedule in just a bit with you all. There are some pieces, however, that need to be completed. Documentation needs to be completed, evaluations that need to be completed prior to being able to fill out that quarterly progress record. One of the things that is needed is this monthly worksheet. The way we envision this tool being used is actually the candidate taking responsibility for recording the hours that they're working in the classroom in the school environment. Now, we've labeled this particular worksheet as optional in that if you have a candidate who is familiar with Excel or wants to create their own version of a worksheet to track their hours, that's completely fine as long as it contains all of the same information. We provide one just for ease of use, but you don't have to use ours in particular. On the sheet, you will notice that it is broken down by month, and it also has information regarding the various domains on the left-hand column. So planning and prep, instruction, classroom and environment, and so forth. Those are all of the domains for which the apprentice is going to be learning and getting experience in the classroom with. You will see that each month has up to 5 weeks. In most cases, you're probably not going to use that 5th week, but there are 5 weeks worth of cells for the candidate to enter the hours that they're working in the classroom. So for example, if you have a candidate who is working in a class 20 hours a week, and they need to record their hours here for tracking purposes, they're going to have to identify how many hours that they're working in each of the identified domains. So there's some flexibility here with the subject matter expert and the candidate. There should be a discussion about, okay, I've been working in the class 20 hours this week. It seems that I'm early on in my experience in this area, and how many hours should I allocate for instruction, classroom environment, professional responsibilities, and to work with the subject matter expert in allocating those hours. So it really is a discussion between the candidate and the subject matter expert. Now, to help guide the subject matter expert in doing that and supporting their apprentice, you're looking at the competencies and the requirements to get a sense about whether they're actually completing hours in any of these areas. So for an early entry, step 1 through 5 candidate, they're probably not doing anything in the area of demonstrating student and teacher learning. So there's probably not going to be any hours allocated there early on. But all of the other areas potentially would have hours. If you know a candidate is not part of your planning and prep, they're not sitting beside you while you're planning and prepping during your prep period, or they're not sticking around after school and helping with that particular information, then maybe they won't have hours allocated there. So really just looking at the competencies, looking at the domains, and figuring out how to allocate. It may be that you decide in a 20-hour work week to allocate, each of the 20 hours evenly among the domains that you feel the candidate has worked in. So we'll leave that for you all to figure out. And of course, we'll want some feedback about how that's going later on. All right, looking at teaching competencies. So I referenced teaching competencies a bit earlier, and that you'll want to make sure that you're looking at this particular information early on and frequently throughout the program. There are about 80 competencies for the preliminary teaching license, and that is quite a few, but keep in mind that we are going to provide you with a schedule, and we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. But I want you to be able to know that this resource does exist, and we will show you where it's located on our website. Early on, when you have an apprentice, we really encourage you to take a look at this entire set of competencies. They are broken up by level 1 and level 2 competencies. The idea is the level 1 competency is for a candidate who is early in the program. They're a newbie, so to speak, and they are just learning about the workings of a classroom and getting familiar. And then as they gain competency, they'll move into competency level 2 requirements later on in the program. So please be sure to familiarize yourself with this particular document and what it contains, and I'm going to show you exactly how you implement that in more detail soon. So I was just mentioning that we have 80-some competencies that need to be taught essentially to your apprentice. This schedule shows you that you're not teaching all 80 competencies at once. You can see here at step 1 that there are actually 9 competencies that are required to be taught to the candidate. So when we talk about, teaching a competency to a candidate, really what we're saying is you need to look at those competencies. You need to provide some examples to that candidate and also train that candidate in carrying out that competency. It may require some scheduling on your part as well. So as you're working through each of the steps to support your apprentice, you'll be looking at this schedule frequently to ensure that they are meeting the scheduling requirements for each of the individual steps. And they're also meeting the benchmark requirements for that step. And we're going to go a little bit more detail later about what that might look like and provide you with some examples. But this schedule does exist to support you. So you're not teaching all competencies at once. Again, you're teaching them the competencies according to the schedule. In addition to the set of competencies that we showed you a couple slides back, we will also provide you with rubrics to help measure the level of competency for each of the stated competencies. So this example here has C3 and I think 56. You can see here it has a description in the second column. It says step targets. That tells you which steps that particular competency is measured. And then it provides you with some details here regarding what you should see at each of the various competency levels and the number of points that the candidate can gain based on what they're demonstrating. Now, in addition to that, you'll notice that there is an incomplete training or not applicable column where there is a 0-point option. There are a number of scenarios that are listed where you might provide a 0 or not applicable for your candidate. Be sure to take a look at those. One of them in particular, we want to make sure that you are aware of is that if the candidate for some reason is not making progress or you have a concern, then you'll want to make sure that you notify your JATC representative very soon after that becomes known to you so that they can support you and support the candidate in rectifying that situation. So notice that that is part of the 0-point area, and I'm going to show you a little bit later how that gets documented. Also, as Susan mentioned, there is a QPR report. The QPR report will take all of the information that we just briefly touched upon a few minutes ago, and it pulls it into one form. So the monthly hours dot worksheet that we showed you, all of the information the candidate is inputting onto that will get transferred over here. And for the quarter, you'll have 3 months worth potentially of hours that will get entered here under work processes. You'll see the similar domains in the A column. In addition, the course completion information is at the bottom. And instead of having to fill out each of the classes that the candidate has enrolled in or completed, a transcript can be attached to this particular document just for ease of use. And then Susan will go to the next page. And then there's a set of questions that the mentor SME should be asking as part of submission of this particular document. So there are actually 6 questions. And we're going to provide a more in-depth training on how to use this particular document because there's quite a bit of information that needs to be considered. But we want to make sure that you're aware that this is ultimately what gets submitted for the final documentation for each apprentice each quarter. And there is a piece here for the apprentice to fill out on page 3 as well.
Okay. Shara, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you'd like to go through a sample for the group, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. Let me share my screen here. All right, I'm hoping you can see. Are you able to see the website? Or are you seeing my spreadsheet website?
Website.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so as we mentioned earlier, there's quite a bit of information available for the registered apprenticeship on the TSBC website. You can go to our website, and if you scroll under preparation and advancement, you will find the registered apprenticeship option about 4 down. And if you select that, it will take you to the registered apprenticeship page. There's some great information at the top, some definitions, frequently asked questions. But if you come on down, you will find all of the resources that we talked about today here in the right-hand area of that particular page. So we first want to highlight the competencies. So if you were to click on the competencies here, it's going to take you to a document that looks like this. And you will see that the preliminary teaching license competencies, as well as all the other approved endorsement area competencies, are within this resource. And as we mentioned, there are competency level 1 and competency level 2 requirements in each domain, and you will find the full set of competencies listed here. So it's a great reference tool when to get familiar with. And let me go on over here. Just wanted to show you that each of these, the monthly worksheet, if you click there, quarterly progress report, if you click here, those things are all available on the website. What I do want to show you though, right now, is to go a little bit more in depth about how to utilize some of these tools. This tool at the very bottom, the Holistic Framework and Evaluation Schedule Workbook, is a tool for the subject matter expert to help you track and document how the candidate is progressing through the competencies that will be measured. Let me pull that on over. If you open it, it will look something like this. And I highly encourage subject matter experts to save a copy, save as, for each apprentice that you're working with. That way you'll have a record of each of the assessments that you've conducted and scores for the candidate. So there's a couple of things once you open this up that I want to point out, and I'm going to try to make this a little bigger. So the placement worksheet for the subject matter expert, you don't need to be concerned about that. You don't need to use that. That's for the placement purposes. So any candidate that's coming into an apprentice program, the JATC uses this to help them determine what phase and step the candidate comes in at. The Holistic Framework tab, however, has some valuable information. This is the full scope of the program. So when Susan shared the phases in one of the first slides, that is a summary of the program in a visual format. Behind that are all the inner workings of the various phases and steps and requirements for the apprenticeship program. Now, one of the things that you'll want to note that is here and very valuable is that it identifies what the probationary period is, where it ends, which is at 700 hours. And there are 3 columns that are highlighted in blue: the OJT hours, the related training hours, and the assessments. All 3 of these areas in blue are needed to determine a re-rating of a candidate. So as they work through the program, if a candidate is at step 1, if you want to re-rate them, they will have to demonstrate that they have completed 200 hours, that they have completed at least 6 semester units, and they have received at least a score of 6 on the competencies that were measured at that step. For candidates coming in at higher steps, let's say you have a candidate at step 4, then you would be looking at this particular area to determine how many hours, how many credits, and how many competency benchmark points they would need. And I'm going to go over here. So when we started looking at the schedule earlier, one of the things that we just wanted to show you how all this information connects back. So I just showed you that a candidate has to have 6 points on the benchmarks, this set of benchmarks for step 1. So if you're sitting down to work with your candidate to score them on this set of competencies, you'll find that the rubrics are all available in this spreadsheet. So you can either click the hyperlink here, or you can come down to step 1 rubric, and you will find that all 9 competencies for step 1 are listed here. So competency C3, C56, C67. If I go back over here, you can see that those are the same ones that are listed here. And if I would have clicked, it will take me to step 1 rubric. So when you're working with a candidate, you'll have the descriptions here, and you'll have each of the descriptions for the various competency levels on the right-hand side. If I were working with a candidate, sitting down, having a conversation with them about what they've been doing during step 1, we really encourage that subject matter experts are engaged in a conversation with the apprentice to determine how they're feeling about their progress in each of the competencies that are being measured. And through that conversation, listening into that input about how they're feeling, where they feel like their score is landing. Ultimately, the subject matter expert is the person who determines the score. And I'm just going to give an example here. Let's say after a conversation, I've determined that my candidate is at a 1 for this particular area. So I award them a 1. And there's no concerns in that area. That means they're at a field training level and they have received training and they are moving along just fine. Let's say we come down to C56, and I have a little bit of a concern. I've worked with the candidate quite a bit, and there's some concerns about how they're communicating with the students in the classroom. And it's a real concern. It's actually something that they've raised their voice. They've not handled misbehaviors very well. And so at this point, I feel like we need a little bit more help than what I'm able to do in the classroom. And I'm giving this candidate a 0 here. And I am noting that it is an unsatisfactory mark because I have a real concern that it's not improving even with the support I've provided. So you would be going through with each one of these and noting a score. And you will notice if you give an unsatisfactory mark, it reminds you to create a support plan. In order to do that, you would need to work with the JATC to determine next steps in creating a plan to support that candidate to rectify the situation. So going through each of these again at each step, and you would do the same when they're ready for a re-rating. You would do the same for step 2. You go through each of the competencies, you would provide a score, and then you would save it and then total it up to see if they are eligible for the next step. And again, you have this holistic resource here where it tells you how many points that they need to achieve at each one. And you have also this simplified version, which tells you which competencies get measured, how many there are, and how many points they need minimum at that particular step to move on. All right, and I think I am gonna, Susan, did I miss anything there that you think I should just elaborate on, or did you want to elaborate on?
I think that's great. I'm not sure. I think we'll wait for a minute for questions until we finish the presentation. But as you can see, as Cheryl went through the competencies, this information goes on the quarterly progress report. And so at the end of each step, this information is presented on that document. The SME or navigator signs the document stating that everything on the document is accurate. And then that particular document is submitted to myself, the administrator of the JATC, for record keeping. I'm going to share my screen and show you the actual dates that it is required. So in the Policies and Procedures Handbook, which I'm sure each of your SMEs have signed and read, at least the areas that refer to their responsibilities, this particular schedule is now listed in there for when the actual document needs to be submitted to myself, emailed to me, and my reference information, contact information is on here. So the 5th workday of April, the first quarter, so January, February, March, and then you turn it in April. If there's any issues with completing this particular document, especially if you as an SME, this is your first time completing the quarterly progress report, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and we can walk through it together. Once you have real numbers and you've gone through the competencies, hours, courses, and we can work through that together. And then it would be the 5th workday in July. If you're not around in the summer and you have not completed this, you can turn it in early in June if you'd like. Then October and January. If the apprentice is late in turning in this document according to the schedule, then I would be notified. Obviously, it wouldn't be turned in, and I would reach out to the apprentice and yourself as the SME and just ask, you know, is it forthcoming? Do you have a problem filling it out? So that we don't keep pushing it to the next quarter. Then if there's multiple missing pieces to this document, then the JATC will be notified to have a what BOLI calls a disciplinary meeting. We call it a conversation to highlight how we can support your apprentice in this way. I want to make sure that the apprentice and the training agents and related training providers have all of these links available. So this particular slide is on this presentation, and each of you will have this presentation sent to you, so it will be available for you to look at these links. Also, Shara and myself, our contact information. SMEs, I want you to understand that you're not alone in this process. You have your training agent personnel to support you, the HR department of your employer. And you also have the JATC to support you. And I want to highlight the role of the related training instructions. So that would be the EPP. And the EPP representatives know what's required for the preliminary teaching license, and they can assist you if you also have some questions in that way. I think we have some time for some questions. If anybody has any, I think I saw a hand raised. Any questions?
That was mine, Susan. And I was
Okay.
just asking, what do you think is a reasonable timeline before to get the apprentices' input prior to it coming back? I mean, so if we were going to set a timeline, normally we'd want theirs back before we did ours and then submit it by the 5th day of April, right?
So this would be kind of an ongoing conversation
Right.
with the apprentice. So I don't know as far as if you want the SME to provide a drop-down deadline when they receive the document to go through it, but part of the competencies is actually a weekly progress check-in with the apprentice. So that is a competency. I can't tell you the number right now, but it is a weekly progress, and that would be a good time to just keep, for the SME to just keep updating and contacting the apprentice on this, for this information. I hope that
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Kathy.
Hi, Susan, and everybody. I know this is down the road a bit, but I'm just wondering, do you think there'll ever be an apprenticeship for an administrator degree as well as a teaching degree?
Well, that's a great question. And the administrative occupation has been accepted by the federal government as an apprenticeable occupation. North Dakota was the first state to acquire that acceptance. And we have Kristen Plumau, who is working with our COSA representatives and our administrative positions, and we are talking about that. So I can't give you a drop-down deadline, but I know that we are interested in pursuing that.
Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and we can handle some other business. I think that, one last thing. At the end of this presentation, there is a slide of all the components required in earning the preliminary teaching license in the Oregon Teaching Apprenticeship Model. To note, if you SMEs have an apprentice that is not progressing very quickly to get their preliminary teaching license, but they are progressing on apprenticeship hours and courses, but maybe they haven't passed an exam or a test, they still can receive their apprenticeship credential through the Bureau of Labor and Industries without receiving their preliminary teaching license. So we would love to see them on track to their preliminary teaching license and whatever endorsement they're seeking, but do know that they still can come out with a credential of an apprenticeship in education, but no teaching license. If anyone has any questions who are viewing this particular training, please reach out to myself or to Dr. Mondragon, and we'd be happy to assist you. Thank you.